Did you know in Do Revenge, the film pays homage to many iconic teen revenge films? Some of these include Jawbreaker, Heathers, Mean Girls, John Tucker Must Die, 10 Things I Hate About You, and Clueless. The film that it seems to reference the most is Cruel Intentions. The last few scenes of this film feature the song Praise You by Fatboy Slim, and the same song was featured in Cruel Intentions. During the welcoming day of school, we see one of the students reading the novel Dangerous Liaisons, and Cruel Intentions is the modern take on this book. Sarah Michelle Gellar plays the headmaster in this film, and she played Catherine in Cruel Intentions. Once the director realizes that she'd be playing the headmaster, he rewrote Sarah's lines to make her sound more like Catherine. Finally, the final shot of the car driving off in the distance is a direct nod to the final scene in Cruel Intentions. Did you know in Hellraiser? Originally, the Chatterer and Butterball Cenobites had dialogue written in the script, but the makeup made their speech impossible. Their lines were given to female Cenobite and Pinhead to help cement his reputation as the film's main character. Originally, Doug Bradley was going to turn down the role of the lead Cenobite to play the role of one of the mattress movers. As a new actor, he felt that the audience should see his real face to help establish himself better. He eventually got so good with the application and removal of the Pinhead costumes that Doug ended up being credited in some of the Hellraiser movies as an assistant makeup artist. Did you know in The Mortal Instruments, City of Bones? The movie took a bunch of liberties from the book. In the film, Clary is able to see the signs that Simon is turning after being bit by a vampire. In the book, he actually swallows vampire blood while he's a rat, and he's bitten by the entire clan later in the series before turning. In the film, Valentine fights using demons to take on the werewolves, yet in the book, he uses Forsaken warriors. In the film, Jace slays the demon in Clary's apartment using a seraph blade, but in the book, Clary kills it by herself using Shadowhunter equipment she got from Jace. Also in the movie, the final battle takes place at the Institute, but in the book, it takes place in an abandoned hospital. Did you know in The Butterfly Effect, there were multiple surprises to the cast and crew that ended up working out? For one, the lights weren't originally planned to flicker in the background of the office when Evan is hypnotized. This was actually caused by an actual short in the wiring. The directors thought that it fit so well that they decided to keep it in the final cut of the film. Also, Eldon had to perform an amazing bodily transformation where he gained 20 pounds in a month after he filmed his normal scenes. He was supposed to look bigger as Crazy Lenny, and he pulled it off to the amazement of the filmmakers. Did you know in No Time to Die, there's a scene where Safine is with Matilda and Bond, and we can clearly see that Daniel Craig is mouthing or mimicking 2 lines of dialogue that are spoken by Rami Malek. It's a clear sign of an actor that's engrossed by the drama of that take, but it's still unclear why they decided to leave this in the final cut. It's been thought that they did so because of the heightened emotional state of the scene. Did you know in Pearl, the adult film that they show in the theater is actually a real vintage stag film? It's titled A Free Ride, and it came out in 1915. The production of the film is a hot topic for debate. It popped up in the 1970s, and it was sold by a shady distributor as a hardcore D.W. Griffith film from 1915. On the other hand, a silent film historian named Kevin Brownlow believes that it was made in the early 1920s instead. Did you know in Thor: Love and Thunder? There are multiple references to the rock band Guns N' Roses. The entire soundtrack is full of tracks from the popular band. There's also the teenager Astrid, who only answers to the name Axl. This is a reference to the lead singer of Guns N' Roses who's named Axl Rose. Axl is also an ancient Norse name which means helmet. There's another child who has a very prominent poster of the band hanging up in their room. The production designer Nigel Phelps actually worked on the music video for their 1992 song November Rain. Also, when Jane wakes up from her nightmare, she sits straight up in bed, and this too is a reference to the same music video of the 1992 song November Rain. Did you know in Thor: Love and Thunder? During the scene where Zeus flicks Thor's clothes off, you can see a tattoo on the right side of his back. This tattoo is actually a list of people that he's lost throughout the years, and the names seen are Mother, Father, Heimdall, Loki, Tony, and Natasha. Later on, we see in the post-credits scene that Zeus is still alive, and they introduce Hercules, who's played by Brett Goldstein. Did you know in Alien vs. Predator Requiem? There were multiple alternate endings that were written up, but they were deemed too depressing or far-fetched. In one, Ricky was going to be impaled and ripped in half by the Pred alien while inside the hospital, but the test screening stated that it was too negative, so they just wounded him. Originally, the climax was going to take place at an airport, and the helicopter would be overtaken by a nuclear blast before it got away. There was another ending where the survivors were found by special forces and killed to keep things quiet. The directors even pitched the idea of Ms. Yutani taking possession of the Predator shotgun and traveling to the aliens' home planet. This would lead to the scientific breakthroughs that gave the Weyland-Yutani company the power it has later on. Did you know in Shazam, the crew had an accidental cameo scene in the film? When Shazam tries to fly in the mall while he battles Dr. Savannah, you can see a group of unimpressed shoppers existing in the background that are paying him little mind. They were actually crew members that were there by accident. They ended up digitally inserting shopping bags with the crew members to give them the appearance of shoppers. Did you know in The Invisible Man, there are actually multiple Easter eggs that tie the film to the original series that aired between 1933 and 1951? The first one comes when Cecilia is sleeping in bed, and Adrian is taking pictures of her with her phone. When she wakes up, she sees a hat and a trench coat on the stand, and this refers to the Invisible Man's original costume disguise. The next Easter egg comes when Cecilia is in the hospital, and she sees a patient that's brought out on a stretcher. The patient has his whole head bandaged, but his eyes remain unbandaged and stare at him. This is a reference to the original design as well. Did you know in Venom, Let There Be Carnage? When Eddie's caught up at Coit Tower to find Cletus, there are several helicopters that fly by looking for symbiotes. This was completely by mistake, and they were actually supposed to be part of the Matrix Resurrection scenes. Andy Serkis could have waited for a clearer shot, but he decided that the helicopters made sense, and he left it. Instead, he added dialogue by Hardy and ADR afterward. Did you know in Tenet, the plane crash in the hangar was actually all practical effects? There was no visual effects or CGI used in that shot. The production team was scouting locations in California when the team came across a huge lot of old planes, and they realized that it would actually be cheaper to buy a real plane instead of putting the budget towards digitally creating the shot. They purchased a real 747 airplane and crashed it into the hangar. Besides that, the film used no green screens at all. Instead, Nolan ended up shooting each scene twice, once with the actors moving normally, and the second time with them doing everything backwards, including talking. Did you know in Rogue One, a Star Wars story? This film explains why the Emperor dissolved the Council permanently in the original Star Wars. All of the territories are directly controlled by regional governors, and it's due to the Battle of Scarif. The battle is the first open assault of the Rebel Alliance, and Palpatine used this as an excuse to call martial law into effect, and this helped him rid himself of the final governmental body that stood in his way of absolute power over the galaxy. This film also explains why the Rebel Alliance was only able to gather 30 starfighters for their attack on the Death Star. Luke is also recruited to replace Red 5, who died at Scarif. The battle on Scarif depletes their forces and the leader, General Merrick. Did you know in Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker? This is the first time that quite a few actors reprise their roles, and they fix a fan-favorite plot hole. Warwick Davis reprises his role as Wicket the Ewok, and his son also plays his son in the film. The name of his Ewok is Pommet. This is also Dennis Lawson's first time reprising his on-screen appearance of Wedge Antilles since Return of the Jedi. He provided the voice for the character in 2001's Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 video game, though. This is also the first time that Billy D. Williams appears on screen since Return of the Jedi. Hayden Christensen reprises his role as Anakin Skywalker in the form of a voice role as one of the many Jedi that speaks to Rey. Chewbacca also gets his long-deserved medal that he was never given back at the end of A New Hope. Did you know in John Wick Chapter 2, the mirror room fight between John and Cassian was supposedly one of the very first ideas director Chad had written down? He wanted to recreate the climactic mirror room fight from Enter the Dragon, so he decided to cap off his movie with the scene in the museum exhibit where they use shifting, shimmering mirrors. While this is a nod to the iconic Bruce Lee scene, it also shares similarities with The Man with the Golden Gun. Did you know in The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies? The film fills in the holes from the book. In the book, the entire story is seen from the perspective of Bilbo. The first part of the Battle of Five Armies was actually witnessed by him in one of the chapters, and the second part of it happens off-screen since Bilbo was unconscious. It's described to him in the next chapter, but in the film, the entire battle takes up half of the running time since it follows so many different perspectives on its own. Did you know in Iron Man, the crew had concepts that they ended up scrapping in the end? During the final battle, they were originally going to have a point where Tony would drive an Audi R8 into Ironmonger's legs before it flips over. After it flips, Iron Man would split the car in half and jump out in his suit. It turns out that the car was so well built that it refused to flip over. They tried repeatedly, but the roof wouldn't split how Jon Favreau wanted it to, thanks to the car's tough frame. The entire final fight sequence had to be rewritten. They ended up using a convertible version in Iron Man 2. There was even a draft of the script where Tony would be shown as the creator of Dr. Otto Octavius' tentacles. At the time, Sony held the film rights to Spider-Man and his universe, so this was abandoned. Did you know in Bodies, 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 the director has stated that the source of light for each individual actually symbolized their personality. Jordan uses a headlamp, which represents her no-nonsense confrontation. Alice is covered in glow sticks, and this is to show her desire to be the center of attention. Bee has her phone strapped to her hip to show her selflessness. Emma actually never has a light source, so this is to show her desire to be introverted. Also, Greg and David never show a light, and this could show how uninvolved with the drama they really are. Did you know an Army of Thieves? We find out about Karina's backstory, and it turns out that she hacked a copy of Pirates of the Caribbean 2. She also released it online way before the movie was scheduled to be released. While that isn't what happened in real life, it is what happened to the 5th Pirates film. It was hacked, stolen, and held for ransom. According to the filmmakers, changing which film was hacked let the story line up better for Karina's age.